Lyra moved as if on autopilot as she faced the wolves. They circled. Fangs bare, growls rolling through the stale air. All things considered, she looked like dead meat. 4 of them. And her with only 2 daggers. A few months ago, she wouldn't have survived. She would have fought anyway, every last breath. Now she had her unlocked abilities and hours of training from the best instructors in the kingdom. She'd never imagined being this alone. No backup, no way out, but there was no turning back. She remembered how her mental power had helped against Beryl. She reached for it, pushing at the wolves' minds. To her relief, it worked. Their movements jerked under her will, just enough for her to dodge, to slip past snapping jaws. But it drained her fast. Precision bled away with every heartbeat. She brought down 3 of the wolves and pivoted toward the last when fresh growls filled the opening. The scent of blood had drawn them. 5 more slid into view, eyes hot with hunger. Until then, she'd thought she could hold them now. With her muscles shaking and her strength burned down to coals, she couldn't see a way. If she stayed, she would lose. But she couldn't just stand here and wait for death. Roger had mentioned an eastern passage. The others had taken it. She could bolt for the western passage instead. No idea where it led, but it would pull the wolves away from the rogues. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find a way out. Wherever it went, it was her only option. She edged back, testing for space. As if they could read her mind, the wolves surged into the chamber, hemming her in. Number, what should I do? She asked Ray, breathless, frantic. As if the fatigue wasn't enough, a strange tingling lit her limbs. She looked down. Panic sparking. Not now, please. Not now. The tingling swelled into something else. A surge of energy flooded her, wild and hot, roaring through her veins. It was unlike anything she'd felt before. And then she understood why. Fur sprouted along the backs of her hands, her eyes burned. Bones ached, her body stretched, tendons singing, skin tearing. Am I shifting? She whispered, stunned. Yes, Ray replied. It's finally happening. Lyra yelped as her spine cracked. Her hands hit the ground. Pain blurred everything, cloth ripping, daggers clattering, ribs reshaping as the wolf took her. She grew and grew, filling the small chamber. Her shoulders scraped the ceiling. Her head thrust up through the trapdoor with a splintering snap. Too big. How could she be this big? The wolves recoiled at the sight of her. With so little space left at the opening, they tried to scramble back down the tunnels. She swept a massive paw, body slammed into stone. 2 didn't rise. She shifted, blocking the only path to the passages. Trapped. The remaining 4 rushed her. They went for her legs, desperate. She was faster. Bigger, stronger. Barely a minute later, their bodies lay strewn across the chamber floor. The air stank of blood and death. Lyra hauled herself through the opening and patrolled the ground above. Every scent sharpened, every sound crisp. She heard nothing, smelled nothing new. I don't think there are any more, Ray said. Let's go back and report this. Yes. They should go back. Instead, the rush ebbed and a burning need rose to feed. It took hold of her, hot and relentless. She prowled the brush, nose low to the earth, hunting for life. Lyra? Ray called, alarmed. What are you doing? Lyra didn't answer. A scent hooked into her and dragged her forward. She veered away from the palace, faster, farther. Ray tried again. Nothing. Lyra was agitated, unresponsive, mind locked on a single drive find prey. With fear prickling her, Ray reached outward for Julian's wolf. There was no one else she could touch, and she had never felt hostility from him. He'd help, once, twice. 3 times panic, rising as Lyra drew farther from the palace. At last, The connection snapped into place. Lyra is out of control. Ray pushed. Urgent. She's in danger. Tell Julian to come. Come get her now. The day after the engagement ceremony, Julian convened a meeting with alphas from packs across the kingdom to address the threat of corrupted wolves. Until now, he'd kept the matter confidential while he gauged the scope. No incidents had been reported in any pack, but his investigation showed a growing presence of corrupted wolves. It was only a matter of time before they became a menace. To stop that from happening, he had to alert every alpha and form strategies to flush them out, then eliminate the threat before it went public. This is surprising news, Alpha Black said when Julian finished. I don't think any of us have had sightings of corrupted wolves in our territories. Your Majesty, is there a possibility you received the wrong information? Julian fixed him with a steely gaze. Are you suggesting I'd call this meeting without fact? Checking my sources? Of course not. Alpha Black glanced at the other alphas. I just think it would be impossible for such a problem to go unnoticed by all of us. Or has anyone had any reports of corrupted wolves in their packs? The alphas exchanged looks, several shaking their heads. No one spoke up. If any pack had seen them, the entire kingdom would know. Julian was glad it seemed the corrupted wolves hadn't appeared anywhere outside the royal forest. What are you driving at, Alpha Black? Julian asked. You suggest we sit like ducks and wait for attacks to start before we act. Oh no, Alpha Black said quickly. I just think we have many other issues to deal with, rather than spending our time on something that probably doesn't exist. It sounds to me like you don't want us to do anything about it, Julian said, voice cool. Maybe you're the one behind the corrupted wolves. Alpha Black frowned. What, Your Majesty? Why would you say that? I would never do something like that. Julian rose, looking down over the table at the circle of alphas. Now that I think of it, this could be an inside job. I fought one of those wolves myself, in the royal forest. My patrol guards have evidence of their presence. And yet they're well hidden and well controlled. Whoever is behind this knows exactly what they're doing and is waiting for the right time to strike. And here we have Alpha Black, wanting us to do nothing. Alpha Black shook his head, a flicker of panic crossing his features. Your Majesty, you misunderstand me. I didn't know you faced one yourself. In that case, yes, you're right. We should do everything to tackle this problem once and for all. Julian leveled a hard look. You had better not be in collusion with witches or anyone behind this. It was the first time he'd hinted at suspecting Black of colluding with enemies of the crown. Enough of cat and mouse. He wanted the man to know he was under watch. And one wrong step would be his last. Anion, who poses a threat to the security of this kingdom, will pay 100-fold. Of course, Your Majesty. Alpha Black's tone cooled. He looked away as if afraid the king's gaze might strip him bare. The reaction only hardened Julian's certainty that Alpha Black knew something, maybe even played a part. If that was true, it was treason of the highest order, and Black would pay with his life. Now that the issue was public, Black would rush to cover his tracks. Fine, Julian would watch him even more closely. After he adjourned the meeting, Julian met Asher in his office for a briefing. With the formalities done, his mind slipped to the night before. He hadn't seen Lyra all day. She couldn't have escaped. Right? If she'd gone missing, someone would have reported it by now. Where is Lyra? He asked. I haven't seen her with the other guards today. Asher's brows knit. Didn't you order her to patrol the western border for rogues? She's been gone since this morning. What? Julian snapped. I gave no such order. Did she say that? The thought flared. Had she used it as an excuse to get away? Was she really going to run? From right under his nose, was she not even a little afraid of him? No, Asher said. She received the order through a palace official. The servant said it came from you. I gave no such order. Julian shot to his feet. I'm going after her. You're in charge here. He left the palace and shifted, sprinting into the royal forest toward the western border. Lyra's scent hit him as he neared stronger than ever, but following it led him in circles. Frustration gnawed at him until Yuri informed him that Lyra's wolf had made contact. The moment Julian heard she was in danger, his pulse kicked. Fortunately, Lyra's wolf gave Yuri directions, and they closed the distance fast. When he finally found her, shock rooted him to the spot. Every sign Yuri's confirmation, her scent, his own bond to her, said it was Lyra. But it wasn't Lyra as he knew her. She was the largest wolf he'd ever seen. He was the Lycan king, the alpha of alphas, and even he looked small beside her. How? He muttered to Yuri. Ray did mention her size was extraordinary. Yuri replied, but she's just an omega, Julian said. Does that look like an omega to you? Yuri asked. Not even close. Julian approached with care, taking in the she-wolf before him. Her white coat caught the sunlight filtering through the treetops and glittered majestic, otherworldly. Power pulsed off her in waves, stronger than anything he'd felt. As he drew nearer, she turned to him. Her eyes blazed red-glowing. Julian had faced many powerful wolves, but none had radiated such menace with a single look. He never cowered. Ever. Yet the sight of her made his hackles rise, instinct prickling along his spine. Are you afraid? Yuri teased, a mocking edge to his tone. Shut up! Julian bit out. Lyra's wolf had said she was out of control. He'd be a fool not to be cautious. Any wolf in that state was dangerous. He didn't want to imagine the damage if she went rampant among others. But how was he going to bring her down? Yuri said even her wolf couldn't reach her. He hadn't expected this, hadn't brought anything to subdue her. Lyra growled, baring sharp fangs, her shoulders bunched as she readied to pounce. Julian realized his only option was to keep her distracted and call Asher for a tranquilizer. If he could get her to chase him through the trees, he could buy time. Before he moved, the she-wolf slouched forward. That massive body sagged, then dropped to the ground. A heartbeat later, Lyra lay there in human form, knees drawn in, shivering. Julian shifted at once and rushed to her, dropping to his knees to lift her into his arms. She stared up at him, eyes glazed confusion, clouding her features. She wasn't fully herself. He'd knock her out, lest she shift again, and bring her back to the palace for Beryl to examine. If you don't want her to go on a killing spree, a sudden voice said, close and calm, mark her right away and complete your bond. Otherwise, she'll go insane and fall into uncontrollable bloodlust. Voices raw, with agony, crowded Lyra's mind. Even after all these years, she recognized them as if it were yesterday. Memories of the mysterious sickness that ravaged her pack flickered through her head, frame by frame, parents forced to watch their children suffer. And children forced to watch their parents, with no way to help. People dying in the arms of their loved ones, hope guttering out when it became clear nothing could stop the ravenous disease. And then, the Truth Blue Night Pack had been targeted by witches. The images lurched, landing on Devon and Allison, his insults sharp as blows the day he learned she was wolfless. The fists that followed again and again, the two of them in bed, laughing at her. The scenes she had shoved into the darkest corners of her mind, tearing free. Then Julian. His cruelty, his coldness, all the ways he had humiliated her. A hard knot of anger swelled in her belly and surged through her veins. They had to pay. All of them. Everyone who mocked her, who laughed, who pushed her down, everyone who made her feel like she didn't belong. Only then would she be free. She saw Julian in front of her and knew he had to die. He would be the first. Before thought could become action, darkness rushed up and everything went blank. When she opened her eyes, Julian's face hovered above her. His brows knitted, confused as he held her close. "Lyra?" His voice was edged with worry. "Can you hear me?" Lyra blinked. What had happened? Why was Julian here? The last thing she remembered was the rogue's den corrupted wolves. She'd taken them down, and then... "Lyra, look at me," Julian said. She refocused. The world steadied into shapes. The forest, cool earth beneath her. The breath of leaves above. "You shifted," Ray murmured inside her, softer than ever. "But you lost your mind right after getting rid of the tainted wolves." "What do you mean I lost my mind?" Panic pricked her. "Had they infected her? I couldn't reach you, and you were out of control," Ray said. "But you're okay now. I think it was from contact with their bodily fluids. They didn't bite you, so I don't think it'll happen again." That didn't calm the dread rising in Lyra's chest. What if it did happen again? Her wolf was powerful, too powerful. If she'd met other werewolves in that state, she would have torn through them without a second thought. She couldn't rest without something certain. "How do I counter it?" she asked Ray. "Is there an antidote?" Silence. "Ray?" Lyra pushed. "Apparently. You have to complete your bond with marking to be safe," Ray said. "You should cooperate with Julian." Lyra blinked. What nonsense was that? She dragged her gaze back to him. "Are you in pain?" he asked, eyes skimming over her for injuries. That was when she realized she was naked. And so was he. He touched her cheeks ridiculous when they'd seen each other like this more than once. "No," she said. Odd, she should have been bruised, broken even. Maybe it was the leftover adrenaline. Julian's fingers brushed her cheek, gentle. "I did not order this," he said quietly. "I would never send you out here alone. Why did you come? After me? Why wouldn't I?" His voice was steady. "You're my mate, and this place isn't safe. Someone wanted you harmed. I couldn't allow it." He sounded sincere. Lyra chalked it up to her scrambled head and dropped her eyes. "My wolf says that." She trailed off, unsure how to say it. Knowing him, he'd accuse her of trying to lure him in. But if this was the only way to make sure she didn't lose herself again, "I need to mark you," he said. "It's the only way to stabilize your wolf." She swallowed, so he knew, fine. They would get this done, quick, clean, and never speak of it again for safety. Nothing else. Julian tipped her chin. "I'm good now," she said softly. "How did you know that would work?" Julian's gaze shifted past her, fixing on something behind her. Lyra frowned and turned. A red-headed woman was bound to a tree and gagged, facing them. Eyes wide. Cheeks flushed. Who is that?" Lyra asked, dragging her gaze from the captive back to Julian. "A witch," Julian said quietly. "She's behind all of this." Lyra glanced back at the girl, young, harmless looking. Was she the one who'd been laughing earlier? And then it hit her. This witch had been there all along, watching the two of them make love. Heat shot up Lyra's neck. She looked away. Julian tipped her chin up, eyes searching her face. "Are you okay?" "Oh, about giving a stranger a free show." "Yeah, totally." She nodded. No point getting flustered. Witches always knew things they had no business knowing. "I'll bring her back to the palace and find out who's behind this," Julian told her. "I'll make her pay for putting you in danger. Why would a young witch want to harm me?" Lyra wondered. Was this tied to the false orders? Or just a cruel coincidence? Back at the palace, the girl gave her name Anna. She claimed she'd once been a werewolf captured by witches. "A werewolf?" Julian sounded doubtful. "You are a witch. When they captured me, they wanted to use me to make those corrupted wolves," Anna said, voice low. "But I turned out to have strong magic, so they turned me into one of them instead. They let me learn alchemy and poison making, and that's how I ended up like this. Why did you attack Lyra? Julian asked. What do you have against her? Nothing, Anna replied. I was following orders. They said she needed to die. No one told me why. It's not my place to ask, and I can't defy them. If I don't do what they say, they'll kill me. Lyra frowned. Julian had said Anna was the one who told him that marking Lyra would stabilize her. Keep her from slipping back into madness. Then why did you save me? Because after you shifted, I realized you're the wolf mother, Anna said. Our kind have waited centuries for a wolf mother. I couldn't harm you, no matter what. I'm a werewolf, after all. The witches use me, and they'll discard me in the end anyway. Hurting you would be like selling my own kind to them. Wolf mother. Lyra looked to Julian. She expected him to scoff, but his face was serious, as if nothing about Anna's words seemed strange to him. She turned back to Anna. You're wrong. It had to be a joke. The wolf mother was a legend rarely seen, the most powerful of all werewolves, stronger than alphas in size and strength. Her arrival meant a blessing from the moon goddess. She led all werewolves, spoke to every pack as one, and no one could resist her dominance when she chose to exert it. She didn't pass through bloodlines. She appeared when and where no one expected. It had been over a century since the last. You saw your wolf, Anna said. Have you ever seen one that big, that powerful? Lyra swallowed. Number she hadn't. I'll offer you a deal, Anna went on, looking to Julian. Keep me safe from the witches, and I'll help you gather information about the corrupted wolves. Julian snickered. What makes you think witches are the only ones you should fear? You put my mate in danger. I should behead you where you stand. Who else can give you insider information on what they're planning? Anna countered. Besides, I saved her in the end, from the mess you led her into. You mean, Julian's tone turned sharp, I didn't have a choice. She said softly. Julian knew she was right. He had never come this close to unraveling the witch's workings. By sheer luck, this one had been a werewolf. And from the way she'd kept Lyra from losing her mind, her true loyalties were with her own kind. She needed protection from more than witches. If there were werewolves colluding with them, as he suspected, he couldn't let anyone learn about Anna. He had to keep her safe while he investigated. Who could he trust with that? Zero. Damn. Ever since he'd confined his cousin for getting too close to Lyra, things had been strained. Good thing Zero wasn't the type to hold a grudge. Right. All right, Julian said to Anna. I'll keep you safe, but you'll tell me everything you know. If you hide anything or mislead me, I'll find out, and you'll pay with your life. Thank you, Anna whispered. I'll do everything I can to help, I promise. Julian reached out to Zero through the mind link and summoned him. Moments later, Zero stepped in. Lyra braced for awkwardness, but he didn't even glance at her or at Julian. His gaze locked on Anna, like he'd just found something he'd been missing for years. Awe flickered across Anna's face as she stared back at him. Do you two know each other? Lyra asked. Maybe Anna had once been part of Zero's pack. Zero moved toward the witch. Anna rose to face him. Julian's eyes flicked between them. Zero, do you know her? Mate, he muttered. Lyra's eyes flew wide. What? Mate, Anna breathed. Lyra and Julian traded a look, baffled by the turn of events. How much stranger could this day get? The room held its breath as the two faced each other. Why was Zero holding himself back? He'd found his mate. Anna took a step toward him, but Zero abruptly turned to Julian. The awe was gone from his face. What did you need me for? This is Anna, Julian said evenly. She's helping me investigate the corrupted wolves. I need you to protect her. Zero looked at Anna, then back at Julian. I can't, Lyra frowned. So did Julian. Why not? You two are mates, right? Zero's jaw flexed. Find someone else. I have to go. He turned and walked out. Lyra stared after him, stunned by the whiplash. He'd looked thrilled a moment ago. So why the sudden cold shoulder? Anna's shoulders sagged, the happiness draining from her face. Julian exhaled. Turns out he can hold a grudge just fine. Lyra wasn't convinced. Zero wasn't the type to refuse help just because he was angry with Julian. Maybe he was in shock. Finding a mate could knock the breath out of anyone. What will you do? She asked. I'll keep her at a secret location for now, he said. He stepped closer, his look gentling. Will you be all right on your own? I've asked Beryl to come check your injuries. I'll be fine, she said. I'll be back as soon as I can. He nodded and turned to Anna. Come with me. Beryl arrived at Lyra's room a short while after Julian left with Anna. She rushed to her, worry etched across her face. Julian had said Lyra fought corrupted wolves. Beryl had feared the worst. Seeing Lyra on her feet, relief washed through her. She dropped her bag and gripped Lyra's shoulders, hands skimming her arms gently. Are you hurt? I'm all right, Lyra said. Just a few scratches. Beryl's lips trembled. Just because you're kick-ass doesn't mean you get to pick fights with those monsters, understand? Even a scratch can be deadly if their Forsaken DNA gets inside you. Don't worry. It won't happen again, Lyra said. Now lie down so I can look at you, Beryl told her. She pulled a medical gown from her bag. Put this on. A few minutes into the exam, Lyra noticed tears pooling in Beryl's eyes. That couldn't be good. Everything felt fine. What is it? The DNA has already spread through your system, Beryl said. Voice thick. There's nothing I can do to destroy it right away. You feel all right now, but as your body fights it, it'll get rough. What I can do is make sure it doesn't take over your DNA. You weren't bitten, so it should be fine. Even as Beryl said it should be fine, Lyra heard the strain in her voice. If it were simple, she wouldn't look like that. It's fine, Lyra said softly. I'm a fighter. It won't beat me. Besides, I've got you. Beryl took her hands and met her eyes. You're right. I won't let it. Then unexpectedly, she pulled Lyra into a tight hug. You'll be okay. Lyra melted into the embrace. Beryl's fierce concern warmed her to the core. It wasn't often someone cared this much about her well-being. After everything she'd been through, it felt like a shelter she hadn't known she needed. When Julian got back to check on Lyra, he found her sleeping. She looked peaceful, but when Beryl told him about her condition, he was filled with rage. It will be hard on her at times, but she'll recover, Beryl told him reassuringly. I'll make sure that she won't be in danger. Julian nodded. I know you will. Thank you. Blowing air through his mouth, he paced the room. Whoever is behind this will pay. I don't understand why anyone would go to such a length to harm her, Beryl said, looking at Lyra with a soft look. She is the kindest person I've met in this place. Whoever they are, this will be the last time they try it, Julian said. Let me see who tries to touch her after this. When he left, he asked for the captain of the King's Guard to find out who had passed on the false information to Lyra. It did not take long before the servant responsible was on his knees in front of Juan. Why did you give false information to her? Julian questioned. The servant looked at him with a pleading look. I swear I did not know it was false information. I was told it was an order from your majesty, and that's what I told her. Who told you to pass it on? Julian asked. The servant's eyes shifted, avoiding him. Do not waste my time, Julian warned darkly. If you do not wish to live the rest of your life in a dark, damp dungeon, you'll tell me who it is right this minute. With shaking hands knotted together, the servant said, It was Miss Black, your majesty. When Julian's jaw clenched, the servant panicked, misunderstanding the king's reaction. I swear, I'm not lying. She called me and told me to tell Lyra that you had ordered her to go to the border. That's why I truly thought it was a message from you. I'm not lying. Julian stalked towards the door. Take him into custody, he said to Asher. Your Majesty, I'm telling the truth. The servant yelled after him. After leaving the room, Julian made straight for Crystal's villa. You'll throw her out of the palace, right? Yuri asked angrily. She wanted to kill our mate. You cannot keep her around. Julian's jaw hardened. He wanted nothing more than to do that. But there was a reason he had brought Crystal to the palace, and he wasn't done using her yet. I'll warn her, but she can't leave yet. Yuri huffed. You are unbelievable. Lyra could have died. You know that, right? She wanted her dead. Do you think I'm not angry about this? Julian snapped back. I want to make that bitch pay with her life. Do it then. You are the Lycan King. You know, I can't do that. Why not? After a tense silence, Julian said, Lyra will be okay if she wasn't. Wow. You know what I mean. I'm afraid I don't, Yuri said bitterly. You want to keep playing house with that evil witch? Fine. I'm out of here. Yuri shut down the link between them, locking him out. Julian sighed heavily. He understood his wolf's rage. If it was anyone else, just the crime of impersonating the king would be enough to send them to the dungeon for a long time. Forget trying to murder his mate. But he couldn't just throw Crystal into the dungeon. Not now. If she pulled this kind of bullshit any other time, she would face the full force of his wrath. When Julian got to the villa, Crystal was having dinner in the dining room. When she saw him, she smiled and got up. Hey, babe. I wasn't toot. Get out. Julian bit out towards the servants waiting in the room. All of you. There was a moment of general silence before everybody scampered out of the room. Crystal's smile fell, replaced by a frown. What's wrong? She asked, her voice dripping with fake concern. Are you okay? When you said you would get rid of her, Julian began. I didn't think you'd get right to it. Crystal's face adopted a look of confusion. What are you talking about? Julian's eyes narrowed as he took a step towards her. I don't have the time to play games with you. Why did you send Lyra to the forest today using my name falsely? Crystal wrapped her arms over her chest. I don't know what you are talking about. On your knees, he growled. She blinked. What? Get on your fucking knees or I'll break your legs and help you along, he threatened. Crystal's throat moved as she swallowed. After a few seconds, she got to her knees. You are being ridiculous, she said. If my father knew how you are treating me, what makes you think I'm afraid of your father? He cut her off. If he's anything like his scheming daughter, he should be the one cowering from me. If you think your Blacksword name gives you any protection in this palace, think again. I'm the king and I answer to no one. Does that mean you can accuse anyone of whatever? She asked. I know what I said last night, but that was just because I was angry. Like you said, you are the king. I'm not stupid enough to go against you. Do I look like the kind of she-wolf who would feel threatened by a mere omega to the point of plotting her murder? I'm giving you one more chance to say the truth. Julian told her. I cannot admit to something I did not do. Crystal insisted. All right, Julian said. Let's see what your messenger has to say. What messenger? Crystal asked. Who are you talking about? Julian took out a chair and sat down. A minute later, Asher led the servant into the room. What did Miss Black order you to do earlier today? Julian asked the servant. She asked me to inform Lyra that your Majesty had ordered her to patrol the western border. The servant replied. What are you talking about? Crystal snapped at the servant. I gave you no such instructions. Do you know what's the punishment for accusing a member of the royal family falsely? The servant, appearing more panicked than before, fell to his knees in front of Julian. I swear, your Majesty, I'm telling you the truth. Crystal huffed in indignation. I can't believe this. First an Omega, and now some servant. Are you going to believe the words of these worthless creatures over me? I'm your fiancé. I did not come to the palace so I could get humiliated like this. I do not care what happens to that stupid Omega, and I have better things to do than dirty my hands with her filthy blood. Julian's hands folded into fists as molten anger streamed through his veins. The image of Lyra in pain, helpless, bloodied, filled his mind. He wanted nothing more than to make Crystal feel everything Lyra had gone through, and then some more. At that moment, he was glad that Yuri had retreated. If he hadn't, there was a possibility he wouldn't have been able to control himself. He got up from the seat and approached Crystal, his face a blank mask. Crystal was proving to be an impressive actress, but he did not have any more time to deal with her bullshit. He had given her a chance to speak the truth and she had thrown it back in his face. So using his dominant powers as an alpha, he asked her, "Did you or did you not send Lyra into the forest to harm her?" Julian could see the struggle on her face as she tried to keep up with her lies. But his compelling power was strong, and her shoulders fell a few seconds later. In a small voice she said, "I did. Tell me how you arranged it," Julian ordered. "Last night someone told me she would help me get rid of her. I was angry, so I accepted the offer. She gave me a location at the western border. All I had to do was send Lyra there and everything else would be taken care of." "Who told you all that?" "I don't know," Crystal said. "It was just a voice in my head." "Is this your way of hiding your accomplices?" Julian demanded. "No," Crystal cried, desperation seeping into her voice. "I'm not lying. The owner of the voice said she wanted the same thing as me. I did not ask any questions today. I sent Lyra to that location as instructed. I don't know anything else about it." Julian gave her a stern, unwavering look for a few moments. In his head, he was connecting the dots. The voice must have been the witches, as he had suspected. It was a collaboration between someone in the palace and outsider. But it appeared that it had been a coincidence, and that Crystal might not have been involved with the witch beforehand. "You'll apologize to Lyra," Julian told Crystal, dropping his compelling tone. "And let this be the last time you trouble her in any way." "Apologize?" Crystal asked in disgust. "Why would I apologize to her? You just admitted to sending her to danger. What else do you think you should do?" "I've never apologized to someone below my rank, and I'm not about to start," Crystal said. "She has caused me enough humiliation already." "Well then," Julian said, "I'll give you until noon tomorrow to pack up your things and leave the palace. I'll send out an announcement canceling our engagement first thing in the morning." Crystal's jaw dropped. "You wouldn't. Suit yourself," Julian said, and turned to leave the room. Crystal shot to her feet. "Fine, I'll apologize to her." "You better," Julian said before leaving alongside Asher and the servant. Left alone, Crystal grabbed a wine glass and threw it at the wall. She screamed, her rage boiling over. How dare he treat her like this? She was his fiancée and the future queen of the kingdom. How could he take the side of an Omega over hers? In that moment, she hated Lyra with every fiber of her being and cursed her accomplice for not doing her job properly. While Lyra recovered, Beryl remained at the palace to take care of her. Like she had predicted, the tainted wolf's DNA caused a lot of havoc in Lyra's system. The first few days were hard for Lyra as she battled everything from a high fever to bodily aches and shivers. She also slept restlessly the first few nights, muttering in her sleep and having constant night terrors. Julian came to see Lyra every day, sometimes twice in a day, without fail. Beryl had never seen her cousin so concerned about anyone before. When he left after one of his visits after Lyra's condition had improved a bit, Beryl finally decided to ask Lyra about their relationship. She thought there was something between them, but there was something in the way they interacted that suggested everything was not all rosy. Also, there was the fact that Julian was now engaged to Crystal. So Beryl wondered whether she had misread everything from the beginning. Julian was showing that he had a gentlemanly side to him, so why on earth would he go for Crystal Black if Lyra was his mate? He is very concerned about you, she said, giving Lyra a smile. It's almost as if the two of you are together. Lyra's lips turned up in a small sad smile before shaking her head. Any other day, Beryl would have teased her about it, but seeing the mix of sadness and bitterness in Lyra's eyes, she let it go. As for Lyra, she felt horrible that Beryl had been stuck by her side for days taking care of her. Lyra was grateful for her care, but she knew that Beryl had a busy life, and that by staying with her, she was putting everything else on hold. What's been going on around here lately? Lyra asked, tucking away the unpleasant feelings from thinking about the status of her relationship with Julian. The least she could do was try to give Beryl some good company, rather than burden her with her endless troubles. Not much, Beryl said. I find that the palace can be awfully boring when no sort of event is going on. Lyra chuckled. It sure can. It wouldn't be boring with you, Beryl told her. So hurry up and get on your feet. Yes, ma'am, Lyra replied with a smile. Have you seen Zero around? A few times, Beryl said. Every time we run into each other he asks about you. Other than that, I don't know what's going on with him. He seems— Beryl tilted her head as she searched for the word. Not himself. How? Lyra asked. He seems a little moody, Beryl said. And trust me, a moody Zero is rare. Oh, Lyra muttered. She had hoped that Zero and Anna would have gotten together by then, but based on Beryl's words it seemed to not be the case. Maybe that has to do with his mate. Beryl's eyes widened. Mate? What mate? That witch. Anna. She is his mate. They recognized each other that day Julian brought her to the palace, she explained. Wait, but she is a witch. How can she be his mate? Beryl asked. She was a werewolf first, Lyra revealed. She was abducted by witches for use in experiments to make corrupted wolves. When they realized she had strong magic power, they decided to make her one of them. Wow, Beryl muttered. So what happened? Julian asked Zero to keep her safe while he investigated the matter. But Zero declined and left. I thought it was due to the shock of finding his mate and that he'd come around. But from what you are saying, it must be that he still hasn't accepted her. If he had, everybody would know, Beryl said. Zero is not the kind of person to be anything but sincere, she frowned. But then again, if she is a witch, that could be an issue. He is an alpha, after all. It's a tricky situation. Lyra understood what Beryl meant. Witches were the #1 enemies of the werewolf community. If an alpha mated with one of them, it would cause an uproar. Nothing like it had happened before. Thinking about Anna's situation, Lyra realized they were almost in the same position. Both of them had mates who refused to accept them because they did not satisfy the criteria they looked for. In a mate, said. Wait. A couple of days later, Lyra asked Beryl to take her outside for a walk. It was a beautiful sunny day, and Lyra wanted to bask under the sunlight and breathe some fresh air. She felt that her physical condition had improved, but Beryl was cautious. Are you sure? Beryl asked. Maybe we can go tomorrow when you are better. I'm feeling good enough now, Lyra told her. I promise. If I feel unwell, I'll tell you right away. Lyra's recovery had been going well, and Beryl was afraid of doing anything that could set her back. But as she saw the pleading look in Lyra's eyes, she could not say no. She did feel sorry for Lyra being confined indoors for more than a week. A short walk probably wouldn't hurt. All right, she said, then moved to help Lyra get down from the bed. Come on. Lyra smiled happily as she finally got out of bed after what felt like forever. They left the room and went outside to the garden. Lyra stopped for a moment, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. The air was fresh, tinged with the scent of flowers. The sun shone on her skin softly, and she realized then how much she had missed its warmth. I don't want to go back inside, she told Beryl. Beryl smiled, also appreciating the serene environment. The garden was beautiful to beyond, with green plants, comfy grass, and a variety of colorful flowers. They walked side by side through the winding paths of the garden, stopping sometimes to marvel at particularly breathtaking flower bushes. The palace garden boasted all kinds of flowers from all over the kingdom, including some that were extremely rare. After walking for a while, they sat down at a bench and talked some more. About half an hour later, Lyra told her they could go back inside. As they started walking towards the building, however, Beryl stopped in her tracks. "What is it?" Lyra asked when she saw the perplexed look on Beryl's face. "I think I just caught my mate's scent," Beryl said, turning around and taking a deep breath. "Are you sure?" Lyra asked. Beryl nodded excitedly. "Yes, I know it's him. It's getting stronger." Her eyes were wide with excitement, moving all over the garden looking for the source of the scent. "He is nearby." Lyra looked around too, full of anticipation. Could it be someone from the palace or someone who was visiting? She heard Beryl suck in a sudden breath and turned to follow her gaze. Just as she looked, a masculine figure appeared at the other end of the garden. When he stepped into view, they saw that it was Asher. His eyes met Beryl's across the distance. Beryl's pulse skyrocketed, her heart beating so hard she was afraid it might break through her ribcage. She was no longer aware of anything else around her, as her eyes remained glued to the male on the other side of the garden. Her mate. On the other side, Asher stood glued to the spot, his eyes glued to the female on the other side. He had never thought that he would meet his mate this way. Here in the palace, while he was frozen in place, his wolf was restless, wanting to go to her. "Wow," Lyra said, looking at Beryl. "Is Asher really your mate?" Beryl nodded, feeling her mouth go dry. "I can't believe you have never met him before," Lyra said. "He is Julian's beta." "I know," Beryl muttered breathlessly. Taking in her expression, Lyra couldn't help but chuckle. "Is any of you going to do or say anything? Or will you both be standing here just looking at each other until the sun sets?" Beryl blinked. Asher finally started walking towards her. When he got close to them, Lyra noticed that his face was red, as if he was blushing. She lifted her brow, amused at seeing such an expression on Asher's face. Asher cleared his throat. "I'm sorry, I have something urgent to attend to. I can't stay." Beryl blinked some more before nodding. "Okay, it's fine. My name is Asher," he told her. "I'm His Majesty's beta." "I'm Beryl from the Beaver Pack," she told him. "I'm a healer taking care of Lyra at the moment. Can I see you later tonight?" Asher asked her. "If you'll be free, that is." "Yes," Beryl said. "Great," Asher said. I'll get going now." Beryl nodded. For a few more seconds, they just stood and stared at each other. Then, Asher gave her a brief smile before walking away. "That went well," Lyra said, wiggling her brow at Beryl. "It looks like the both of you are besotted with each other." Grinning, Beryl hooked their arms and steered her towards the building. "Let's get you back inside." Once they were back inside her room, Lyra asked, "How does it feel?" Beryl pressed her palms to her cheeks and smiled widely. "I can't put it into words. I'm so happy. It feels like I've finally found something I've been looking for a long time. Funny, because I never really gave it a lot of thought." Lyra knew that feeling very well. Nothing could compare to meeting the person who was made for you. But, fortunately, that was as far as the similarities between their experiences went. While Lyra's happiness had been destroyed shortly after meeting both her mates, Beryl's case looked more promising. Lyra wiggled her brow. "It sure helps that he is so handsome, right?" Beryl laughed. "I can't believe I never met him before this. It is not that I didn't know about him and that he is Julian's beta, but now that I think of it, we've never been in the same room before. Looking at you, I don't need to ask if you like him," Lyra said. "You looked ready to jump him in the garden." Beryl blushed. What is not to like? For a second, I was afraid that he would not like me. But if he didn't, he wouldn't want to meet later, right? Are you kidding? Lyra asked. Am I the only one who saw how he was looking at you? I never thought I would see such a look on Asher's face. He looked like a different person altogether. Beryl's eyes danced with excitement and curiosity as she leaned towards Lyra. I can't wait to get to know him better. He looks like he could be a real romantic. Before this, Lyra would not have agreed with that. Most times, she had interacted with Asher. It was with him being Julian's no-nonsense beta, and nothing about it suggested that he had a soft side. But after seeing his reaction in the garden, she could agree with Beryl's deduction. I wish you all the best, Lyra told her. I have a strong feeling he is going to be perfect for you. She really hoped so. At least one of them should get to experience having a loving mate. Sigh, wet. A couple of days later, Beryl showed up to Lyra's room with a face glowing from happiness. Lyra watched her in amusement as she went about checking her vitals. Everything looks good today, Beryl said as she put her tools away. If it keeps on like this, you'll be out of here in no time. Thanks. That is good to hear, Lyra said, a smile playing on her lips. While Beryl had been busy, Lyra had spotted a few red marks on her neck. Earlier, Beryl had left to go on a date with Asher. It looks like you had a good time with Asher. He even gave you a few souvenirs. What souvenirs? Beryl asked in confusion. The ones on your neck, Lyra replied. They are very noticeable. Beryl instantly blushed and covered her neck with her hand. We made out? Lyra helped her out. You two just hit the ground running, huh? Something like that, Beryl said, grinning. He is really irresistible, is he? Come on, give me the deets. Where did he take you? Beryl started narrating what happened during the date. An hour later, they were still talking and laughing their hearts out, with none of them thinking about going to bed. The lively atmosphere was suddenly interrupted when there was a knock on the door. Come in, Beryl called, thinking it was Julian, but when the door opened, it was Crystal who appeared. Beryl's expression flattened as she stood from her seat and headed towards the door. What are you doing here? Crystal looked past Beryl and to Lyra. I came to apologize. You can go back where you came from, Beryl told her. Lyra does not want anything from you. Crystal scoffed and pushed past Beryl, forcing her way into the room. What makes you think I want to do this either? I am only here because the king asked me to. And what makes you think I'll accept your half-assed apology? Lyra asked her. I've never apologized to anyone in my life, Crystal claimed. You should count yourself lucky. I came all the way here for this. You'd be lucky if I accepted it, Lyra told her. Leave my room. Crystal had a few choice words she wanted to say, but she held them back. She could not blow this. If she did not apologize, Julian would throw her out of the palace. The only reason it had taken so long was because he had forbidden her from seeing Lyra until she was feeling better. After so many days, Crystal had thought that Julian had forgotten about it. But earlier that day, he had told her he expected her to apologize as soon as possible. It was outrageous. But she could not defy him when he threatened to end their engagement. Fine, she said, raising her chin. What can I do to make you accept my apology? Lyra was not in the least interested in Crystal's apology, because she knew Crystal would never mean it. The only reason she was here was because Julian had ordered her. Lyra could see that doing so was hurting her pride, and even if the apology had no effect on her, it was nice to see Crystal knock down a peg or two. After thinking for a while, Lyra said, There is something you can do. If you do, I'll accept your apology. What is it? Crystal asked haughtily. Do you want money? I can give you enough to live off for a lifetime. One side of Lyra's lips turned up. She could not even say that she was surprised that Crystal thought her money could fix everything, not that anything was being fixed. I want you to serve as my servant for a day, Lyra told her. Once you do that, we'll be even. Crystal stared at her blankly for a few seconds. Then, her face scowled in disgust. You must be kidding. Nope. She just wasn't going to make it easy for her. Crystal, acting as a servant. Surely she would not. Lyra was not interested in her sincere apology, but she did not want to cause trouble with Julian if Crystal blamed it on her. So, her best option was to give Crystal a task she would definitely refuse. No, I'm not, Lyra said calmly. That is what you have to do. Crystal scoffed and gritted her teeth. She could not imagine it. Her, servant. How ridiculous. She had never been reduced to such a lowly position. I can do anything else but that, she told Lyra. Lyra shrugged. That is what I want. If you can't do it, you can leave. We are done here. Crystal glared at her. At that moment, she wished she had gotten rid of Lyra much earlier, back when she had been just a slave. Now, after being elevated to a guard, she acted like she owned the fucking palace. Where did she get the audacity to speak to her like that? Crystal wanted nothing more than to leave and never look back. But that thought was quickly followed by a memory of Julian's threat. No matter how humiliating being a servant was, it wouldn't be more humiliating than Julian canceling their engagement. She took a deep breath. Fine, once she was queen, she would make this bitch pay. Okay, she told Lyra. I'll do it tomorrow. Lyra looked at Beryl. Surprise in her eyes, the last thing she had expected was for Crystal to accept the condition. Looking back at Crystal, she said, Yes, don't be late. With her jaw clenched tight like a spring, Crystal turned and stomped out of the room. Holy heavens, Beryl muttered after closing the door after Crystal. I can't believe she accepted. Me neither, Lyra said, a frown forming on her face. Did you see how pale she got? I thought she was going to curse me out and leave. Me too, Beryl said. I was ready to jump in if she decided to attack you. She looked so pissed. Beryl sat back down, her face a mask of thought. Is this really the Crystal Black I know? She wouldn't accept to do something like that unless she was possessed or something? I didn't think she would accept, Lyra confessed. She was in contact with the witch, so who knows? She is probably possessed by one of them, Beryl said. That is the only thing that makes sense. Lyra bumped her head back into her pillow, groaning. If I'd known she would accept, I would have thought of something more difficult for her to do. Now, I have to spend an entire day with her. I can't even stand to look at her face. How will I survive? Come on, it won't be that bad. What can be more entertaining than watching her do the same thing she regards with contempt? Beryl asked, waggling her brow suggestively. You'll be her boss, so you can make her do whatever you want. Take this as your chance to make her pay for all the nasty things she did to you before. If she doesn't murder me first, Lyra said. Did you see the way she was looking at me? I don't think anyone has ever looked at me with so much hate, and I've had my share of people who don't like me. All the more fun you should have, Beryl told her. She can glare all day while fetching your coffee or preparing your bath. If she isn't fast or good enough, you can make her kneel in the corner, or send her to scrub pots in the kitchen. Lyra laughed. Now, you want me dead. Beryl laughed too. No, she would be the one who dies when she bursts in anger. They talked for a long time, imagining the things that would utterly make Crystal lose it. Even though her apology meant nothing to Lyra, she agreed that making her do something she absolutely detested would make her feel better about it. If it meant that Crystal would think twice before messing with her again, all the better. After Beryl left, Lyra tried to go to sleep. But it wasn't easy. Lately she had realized that her senses were sharper than ever. That night, what kept her up was Julian's scent. She knew he was nowhere near, and yet she could sense it as though he was in the next room. Other than the scent, there was an ever-present feeling of connection to him she could always feel. It was like a tangible emotional bond. It was hard to tune it out, especially when she was alone, and it was all quiet. It would have been an amazing thing if her mate was not in the process of marrying another female. She hated feeling constantly connected to him like this, because all it did was make her miserable. She wondered whether he felt it too. If he did, what did it make him feel? Annoyed. She turned in bed and closed her eyes, trying to ignore his scent and the longing that festered like a wound deep inside her. There was no use dwelling on something that only hurt her. He had chosen someone else. She had to accept the reality. Unfortunately, reminding herself of the reality of the matter did not help much. She wanted him so badly it hurt. She wanted to turn back time and go back to when they had something good going on. That was what made it harder, knowing how good he could be to her. It would have been better if he had been a jerk throughout. That would have made it easier to fight her desire for him. In the end, she found herself going back to the forest, to when he had made love to her and marked her on the forest floor. She could almost remember his every touch, kiss, sigh. The memory filled her with a certain warmth, while also leaving a deep, empty feeling inside her. The next morning, it turned out that Lyra did not have to suffer Crystal's presence all day. While Lyra was waiting for her to show up, one of Crystal's servants arrived with the message that Crystal was sick and could not serve Lyra for the day. Lyra knew it was absolute bullshit, but she was happy that she did not have to deal with her. Since she was feeling a lot better than she had in a long while, she decided to leave her room and find out what was going on with Anna. Julian had not really given her any updates on how his investigation was going, so she decided to seek him out herself and get the answers she wanted. After finding out that Julian was in his office, she went to see him. When she walked through the door, he rose from his desk and approached, a concerned frown on his face. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Why are you out of bed? Where is Beryl?" "I am fine," Lyra answered him. "I would like to check up on Anna. Can I visit her?" "Of course," he said. "I can take you to see her." "No thanks," she told him. "Just have someone take me to her." The last thing she needed was to spend more time in close proximity to him. It was hard enough to control herself when they were not together. This close, it would be impossible. "I'm not busy, I'll take you," he said, moving closer to her and the door. Lyra took a step back, putting more distance between them. "You don't have to," she told him. "You must have more important things to do. I am sure one of the guards can take me there." Julian paused and looked at her. "Are you trying to avoid me? Don't you have better things to do?" she asked. "You came asking to see Anna," he said, his voice sharp with annoyance. "So I'm taking you to her. I am the only one who knows where she is. Do you want to go or not, or do you think I am up to something?" Lyra's teeth toyed with her lip. She had to stay away from him. Being close to him made her lose her mind, and she was determined to forget all about him. "Sorry for disturbing you," she said, turning around to leave. Julian hurried and stepped between her and the door. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Lyra scoffed. "What is wrong with me?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Just leave me alone." "You are the one who came looking for me," he pointed out. "If you weren't going to accept my help, why bother? Who else would I ask?" She shot back. "Or did you make it public knowledge that you are holding a witch in the palace for questioning? All right then. Come with me, I'll take you." "Forget it. Why are you being so difficult?" he growled. "Are you still going to marry Crystal Black?" she asked. He blinked. "What? You heard me?" His jaw ticked. Then he gave a curt nod. A sour smile stretched her lips. Of course, his behavior suggested otherwise, but she had known it didn't mean he had changed his mind about Crystal, and yet he wanted to know why she was being difficult. He didn't want her, and they weren't friends. Julian cussed mentally as he looked at Lyra. She was giving him the same look she did when she rejected him. It turned out that even after everything that happened, she was still determined to reject and leave him. She had not said anything scathing to him for a while, but maybe that was because she had been bedridden. Now she had her strength back, and as it seemed, the same determination to cut all ties with him. "I'm still not allowing you to leave," he told her. "You cannot leave this place without my permission." The air between and around them crackled with tension. Lyra sucked in a deep breath. When she left her room, she had not thought she would get into a fight with anyone, but here she was. "Stop," Ray told her. "Don't fight with him." "Why not?" Lyra challenged. "He thinks he can control me however he likes." "When will you patch things up if you keep picking fights?" Ray asked. "Patch up what things? He is going to get bound to Crystal. I am never going to accept to be his mistress, no matter what." Ray went silent after that. She too did not want him to be with Crystal. "After all, we'll see about that," Lyra said out loud to Julian. She stepped to the side to walk around him and get to the door, but a sudden pain in her side caused her to stumble. Instinctively, Julian reached out for her. He wrapped his arm around her, keeping her from falling to the floor. Surprised, Lyra looked at him, meeting his honey-colored eyes. She swallowed as her heart began to race. Damn it! This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid all along now. In his arms, she could not find the motivation to push him away. Julian stroked her arm with his other hand. "Are you okay?" Lyra swallowed again, against an onslaught of his scent. It was unfair, so unfair. She shouldn't be reduced to a mess just because of one whiff of his scent. She shouldn't want to press herself closer to him. She shouldn't feel like in his arms was where she belonged. He didn't want her. He didn't want her. He didn't. Her hand curled around his shoulder, holding on rather than pushing him away. Julian had expected Lyra to push him away. So, when she held on to him, it surprised him. Seeing her reaction, he moved his hand from her arm to her cheek. He gently caresses her skin, moving his thumb to her lips. He could see her struggle, and he knew only the power of their bond was making her so pliant. "Wait for me," he told her, stroking her lips and looking into her eyes. Her lips parted as she looked back at him. "What do you mean?" He wished he could tell her. He hated it when she acted like he was her biggest enemy. He wanted her to know he wasn't doing all this to hurt her, or because he hated her. When Julian remained silent, a mix of emotions rushed through Lyra. The look in his eyes when he said those words, she could not describe it, but it weakened her resolve to defy him. She couldn't let that happen. In his arms and under that gaze, her heart melted like butter, rendering her helpless. She lowered her face, avoiding his gaze. But he did not let her evade him for long as he took her chin in his hand and lifted her face to him. "Lyra, promise me," he told her softly. "Wait, don't go, please." She could not tell what he meant by that, but she understood him nonetheless. He didn't want her to stay just so he could keep hurting her at least. That is what her muddled brain convinced her. She did not know what she was supposed to wait for, but she found it impossible to refuse him. It was like he knew exactly how to break down her barriers, make her forget her resolve, and make her do exactly what he wanted. At that moment, it did not seem like a bad thing. It felt natural to trust him. "Lyra," he called, his voice cajoling. She swallowed. But before she could do or say anything, Asher's voice came from the direction of the door. "Did you need me, Your Majesty?" Julian and Lyra jumped apart, each of them avoiding Asher's eyes. Asher cleared his throat awkwardly. Maybe he should have knocked first. Julian turned around and went back to his desk. Reaching for a random file, he said, "Take Lyra to see Anna." "Got it," Asher said, then beckoned to Lyra. "Let's go." Lyra, with her face red with embarrassment, walked past him and out of the office. Asher led the way to the southern wing of the building, where Lyra had never been before. The wing was eerily empty and silent, as if nobody lived or worked there. They walked in silence for quite a while before Asher tried to break it. "Feeling good today?" Lyra gave him a sideways glance. amused at his awkwardness. Even after seeing him with Beryl, it was still amusing to see him be anything other than the Lichen King's icy beta. Yes, Asher nodded, then rubbed the back of his neck. I don't mean to meddle, but Julian cares about you even if it might not seem like it. Lyra frowned as she studied him. It was clear that talking about it was making him uncomfortable, and yet he went ahead and said it. Once again, this was something she would not have expected from him. What do you mean? How could he say that Julian cared about her when he knew very well what his own boss was doing? Julian was engaged to the female who had tried to kill her. If he cared about her, wouldn't he have at least punished Crystal for it? I can't tell you more, Asher said. But everything he is doing is for a reason, and he doesn't mean to make it hard on you. Lyra frowned. What reason? I can't say. Just trust him. Just trust him. Yeah, that was easier said than done. But hearing what Asher said, and remembering Julian's words just a few moments ago, she realized there must be more than meets the eye. What was Julian hiding from her? Did it have to do with Crystal? Deciding to not dwell on Julian and whatever mysterious secrets he was hiding, she asked, How is it going with you and Beryl? Of course, Beryl had told her every detail there was to tell, but she couldn't fight her curiosity about Asher's own reaction. Good, Asher replied, rubbing the back of his neck again. He stole a quick glance at her. I hope, Lyra smiled, understanding his hesitance. He must know that whatever Beryl thought of them, Lyra knew. She is happy, Lyra told him. Very, actually. She is amazing, he said. That she is, Lyra agreed. Asher cleared his throat. I am glad that she is happy. I want to make her happy, Lyra chuckled. He was proving to be more and more adorable. It was clear that he was thoroughly taken with Beryl, and he took their relationship seriously. Lyra wondered if Julian had ever had such an adoring look on his face when he talked about her. If he ever talked about her. She was still his dirty little secret, after all. She was happy that Beryl had hit the mate jackpot, and she couldn't help feeling a little envious. How would it feel to have a mate who was obsessed with her? Someone who would turn into a different person when with her because of how much he treasured her. Someone who wasn't afraid of showing everyone that she was his and that he belonged to her. Would all that remain to be just a dream for her? Finally, they got to a door that Asher opened and stepped aside. She is inside. I'll keep the room locked for security purposes. When you are ready to leave or need anything, press the red button by the door. Okay. Thank you, Lyra said before walking into the room. It was a simple room, with a bed, table, closet, and chair. There was only one small window at the very top of the wall near the ceiling, but the room was brightly lit and well-conditioned. As soon as Lyra stepped in, she saw Anna lying on the bed. On seeing her, Anna jumped up and approached her. What a surprise! Lyra smiled at her. How are you doing? I am good, Anna said, then gestured around the room. Even though this feels like a prison, at least it is not a dungeon. Did you come for me? Seeing the excitement on her face, Lyra felt bad as she shook her head. No, sorry. I just wanted to see how you were doing. Oh, Anna mumbled, unable to hide her disappointment. But she smiled right after that. I'm glad you came to see me then. It is awfully lonely in here. Lyra wished she had come earlier. She could not imagine what it was like for Anna to be confined to such a small space for such a long time. Anna pulled out the chair and presented it to Lyra. Take a seat. She sat down on the bed facing Lyra. It is good to see you. How are your injuries? I am better now, Lyra told her. I wasn't able to leave my bed for days, but I got past that. I am not in any pain now. I am happy to hear that, Anna said. You are strong. You will recover fully. Thanks, Lyra said. I was hoping to talk about something important with you, if you don't mind. Of course, Anna said. Anything, that day. You said I am the wolf mother. What do you know about it? Is there more you can tell me? As you may already know, the wolf mother is the most powerful werewolf who can exist, Anna began. And when she appears, she symbolizes a new era for all werewolves. She can unify all werewolves and has power to control them all, whether it is the Lycan King or rogues. I've heard stories about her, Lyra said, but I did not believe such a powerful she-wolf can actually appear. She finally has, Anna said, leaning towards Lyra and giving her a somber look. It happens rarely, and it is not easy. The wolf mother is quite strong, so there will be some strain on you, especially on your mental state. If a wolf mother is not stabilized by a mate, she risks losing her mind and going berserk. In that case, she becomes a bloodthirsty hunter and can kill all werewolves around her. This was all so much for Lyra to take in. It didn't feel like Anna was talking about her. It was hard to accept that she could be such an important figure. She had been born an Omega, and only recently did she manage to build her strength. She simply could not wrap her mind around such a possibility. So that is why you asked Julian to mark me that day, she said. Anna nodded. Yes. As your true state awakens, you'll undergo a lot of changes, and you cannot bear them without a mate's support. If she was really the wolf mother, then she was screwed. Julian had no interest in being a proper mate to her, and she was also not going to accept him with the way things stood. She decided to not worry about that. Whatever awaited in the future, she'd deal with it when the time came. What about you? She asked Anna. Why did they send you to a base near the palace? Are they planning to attack the palace? They sent me here to observe the king, Anna revealed. Apparently, there is an old curse that affects every Lycan king. If he does not find a mate before his 30th birthday, he might lose his mind and die. The witches target the king's mate to make this happen, and they already killed his mate thanks to a prophecy. Now, all they are doing is waiting for him to go mad, so the pack can go into chaos, and they'll get a chance to take advantage. After what had happened in the forest, Anna had realized that Lyra could be the Lycan King's second chance mate, which meant as long as she was with him, the curse would not take effect. If the witches knew about her, they would do their best to get rid of her. Hearing this shocked Lyra. It was unfathomable that the witches could have so much power. If the curse affected every Lycan king, that meant the king's fates depended on whether the king found his mate first before they did. And if the witches thought they killed Julian's mate, then did that mean she was his second chance mate? Like he was for her. Do you know that my pack was wiped out by a mysterious disease years ago? She asked Anna. Was that perhaps related to all of this? Anna nodded. A slight frown on her face. Maybe they knew about a second chance mate and wanted to get rid of her too. But since you are his second chance mate, it might not have been easy to find you like his first mate. But they must have known about which pack she was from, so they massacred everyone to cover their bases. A bitter taste filled Lyra's mouth to think that hundreds of people in her pack died just because the witches were after one person. How could they be so callous? What had werewolves done to them for them to be so merciless towards them? Did this mean that all those deaths were because of her? And why had she been the only one to survive? What happened was not your fault, Anna told her, able to tell what was going on in her mind. The witch who is behind this is ruthless, and she'll do anything to get what she wants. She'll do anything to see the downfall of the werewolf race. Lyra swallowed, her guilt mixing with a feeling of hatred and disgust. I'll make her pay, she swore. I'll make her pay for every life she destroyed. She is very powerful, Anna told her. If you are to defeat her, you can't do it alone. Even as the wolf mother, you'll need your mate. Is there any way to break Julian's curse? Lyra asked. As long as the curse existed, the witch had an upper hand. Anna shook her head, looking apologetic. I am sorry. I don't know. It is highly secret information that someone like me cannot know. My status among the witches is not high. That is why they sent me to keep an eye on the Lichen King. I am dispensable. If they find out I've been captured, rather than try to rescue me, they'd try to get rid of me. Ooh, I am sorry to hear that, Lyra told Anna, feeling bad for her. So even if the witches had not turned her into a mindless tainted wolf, she was still just an object for them to use as they pleased. A part of me is happy that the Lichen King captured me, Anna said. The witches' camp is like hell for me. Since they brought me there, I've been treated worse than trash. Even though their leader wanted to make use of my magic powers and thought I was useful, nobody treated me like one of them. From the day I stepped foot there, I was considered an outsider, an enemy. The day I was assigned outside the camp, it was like getting a breath of fresh air. As Anna narrated her story, Lyra realized they had many things in common. The way Anna had been treated by the witches reminded her of the treatment she received in Devon's pack. As long as she was there, she was considered an outsider and never accepted as part of the pack. At the witches' camp, I had no freedom or choice. As soon as I was done with my classes, I had to go straight to work like a slave. Every night I would go to bed tired, only to be woken early the next morning for more chores. Some of them bullied me because they thought I was favored by the leader and that I was taking a place that belonged to them. I wish they had been right, because then she would have at least protected me. Lyra could not help reaching for Anna's hand and stroking it gently. The sadness in Anna's eyes and voice was too much, as if she was reliving the horrors she went through at that camp. It is okay now. That is all in the past. You'll never go back there. Even if Julian did not allow Anna to stay at the palace, she now had Zero. No matter what, Lyra knew that Zero would not allow his mate to be in trouble. Anna gave a shaky smile, dropping her eyes. Do you know the male I met that day? My mate? Yes, Lyra answered. His name is Zero. He is an alpha and also a cousin to the king. Anna's smile became even sadder. I guess that means he'll never accept me since I grew up with witches. No, Lyra denied immediately. He would not hate you for something like that. They kidnapped you and you had no choice. Zero is not the kind of person who would hold that against you. But you saw the way he was that day, Anna said. He avoided me. I don't know why he did that, but I can assure you, he is a good male, Lyra told her. If it was not for him, I would not have survived my early days in this place. I came here as a slave, you know. Anna's eyes widened. Really? Lyra nodded. I was working as a maid, and the other Omegas were picking on me. I could not shift, so they overpowered me. If Zero hadn't showed up and stopped them, they would have injured me seriously or even killed me. He even punished them. After that, he helped me several times. I consider him my benefactor and the first friend I made here. He will definitely be a great mate. I know it. I don't know, Anna said in uncertainty. The king once came to question me, and Zero was with him. He was very cold towards me, like he hated me. I understand if he hates me because of my connection to the witches. It must be a misunderstanding, Lyra said. I am sure once he knows that you are not willingly part of the witches' plans, you two will be able to grow close. Maybe he is simply being vigilant until the investigation is done. Lyra's words filled Anna with new hope. The few times she had seen Zero, she had been convinced that he would never accept her. It had been such a blow to her, since she had been so happy to find her mate. But if what Lyra said about Zero was true, there was hope. All she had to do was show him that personally, she held no ill will towards werewolves. Sigh. Pooh. After leaving Anna's room, Lyra went back to see Julian. After hearing Anna's story, she could not bear to have her confined in that small room any longer. Also, she did not want to waste any time and wanted to get straight to dealing with the witch behind everything. That meant cooperating with Julian. No matter how much she wanted to avoid him, Julian's reply was not very encouraging though. You'll not get involved in this. I am working on it, and that is all you need to know. I can help, Lyra said. I am no longer a powerless Omega. I want to help find her and take her down before she causes any more trouble. Julian stopped what he was doing and looked at her. He would never allow her to join the investigation against the witches. They had already targeted her once. His goal was to keep her as far away from danger, not invite her to it. You must think you are all that now since you qualified to become my guard, he said, his voice harsh. Do you think this is child's play? Do you know what these witches are capable of? Yes, Lyra replied firmly. I'm the lone survivor of an attack on my pack, so yes, I know what they are capable of. I don't want to stand by anymore while they keep creating chaos. You don't have what it takes, he told her. Go back to your room. Beryl is worried about you. Even if you don't involve me in your investigation, I'll do it on my own, she told him. You can't do that, he said. Why not? She challenged. Because I forbid it, he growled. What will you do? Lock me up, she dared. Julian got up from his seat and went around his desk to stand in front of her. Maybe I should, he said darkly. I am trying to protect you, but you are too stupid to see. You are just an Omega. You have no place in my business. An Omega who took down dozens of corrupted wolves, she said, glaring at him. How many have your royal guards taken down so far? You would have died if I'd not come after you, he said. Oh, please, she snapped. I was in no danger myself. No, you were not. Just everybody else around you, he deadpanned. Who knows when else you'll go running around looking for something to kill? Lyra's nostrils flared as her anger writhed beneath the surface. The way he said it, it was like she was some sort of monster that needed to be kept under lock and key. Julian pinched his nose, sighing. Look, I'll release Anna from confinement and she can get a normal suite. But that is all I am willing to do for now. Fine. You do you and I'll do me, Lyra said. Julian dropped his hand. If you don't back down, she'll remain in that chamber for as long as I please. What? She asked in disbelief. That is right, he said. Now, do we have a deal? Lyra pressed her lips together, deeply annoyed. It was good that he was willing to release Anna, but she hadn't foreseen that he would use that to control her. Sighing again, Julian placed one hand on her shoulder and the other on her chin, turning her face up. Lyra's skin tingled. Don't make this harder than it has to be, he told her, his voice softening. She swallowed. Damn him. She wanted to curse and scream at him and tell him he couldn't control her, that she'd do what she wanted anyway. It was amazing how she could switch from warm to cold so quickly. Just a few minutes ago, she had been clinging to him and crying out his name. Now, she was acting like they were a couple of strangers. Don't forget your promise, she told him as she pulled on her jacket. He blinked. What? To release Anna, she said. Ah. Yes, Anna. Of course, at least she cared about something. She didn't even wait for his reply as she left the office without a single glance back at him. True to Julian's word, he released Anna and had Thea allocate her a better room in the same building Lyra was staying. During her first days outside confinement, Anna spent most of her time with Lyra and Beryl. Since Lyra was no longer bedridden, she was able to take her on a tour of the palace grounds, helping her familiarize with everything. At first, Anna was very happy. This was the closest she had ever come to a normal life since being captured by the witches. She had friends. She did not have to work every day until her back ached, and there was nobody controlling her every movement. In such an environment, it was easy to put her horrible past behind her. However, as the days went by and more people became aware of her presence, rumors started spreading about her origin. The truth of her identity and background became common knowledge, subjecting her to vicious rumors and discrimination from those around her. At first, she tried her best to ignore it. She could not control what people said or thought about her. All that mattered was that the Lichen King had given her another chance to be a part of the werewolf community. She also had good friends in Lyra and Beryl, who treated her with kindness and sincerity. It was more than she could ever have hoped for, and she was not going to let a few sour stares ruin it. It was with this mindset that she attended her first banquet at the palace. It was a banquet where many nobles were gathered, with only the most important figures in the kingdom invited. Anna was surprised when Beryl told her that she could go with her. She was happy to get a chance to experience such a grand occasion. Most werewolves never got such an opportunity. However, her happiness soon dissipated, as it became clear that the nobles knew who she was, and they did not like it. What is His Majesty thinking, allowing a traitor like her to stay at the palace? One male wondered while staring blatantly at Anna, not bothering to hide his contempt. For all we know, she could be a spy sent by the witches. Anna turned away to move away from him. But he was not the only one with something to say. I heard she is a witch herself. This is like inviting an enemy into our base. Ridiculous. She must have bewitched the king, someone else said. Why else would he allow her to stay? Disgusting. If I'd known someone like her would be here, I would not have attended. The hall was full of people who glared at her and spoke such harsh words, and in the end, Anna left and went back to her room. She had known that people were saying horrible things about her, but hearing it herself and seeing the clear hate in their eyes hit too close. It reminded her of all the taunting and bullying she underwent at the witches' camp. At least here, no one was physically assaulting her. After that incident, Anna decided to not dwell on it and focus on positive things. Since her release from the secret room, she had been trying to get closer to Zero, but he always seemed to be able to avoid her. So taking matters into her own hands, she asked Thea to put her in charge of delivering his food and taking care of his room. She asked around and found out his favorite foods, and the next morning, she prepared him breakfast and took it to his suite. She even woke up extra early to bake him fresh bread. When he opened the door, she gave him a bright smile. "Good morning, Alpha Zero. Your breakfast is here." He paused, clear surprise in his eyes at her appearance. "What are you doing?" he asked in an annoyed tone. "I made your breakfast," she told him. "I heard that you like gingerbread, so I baked a fresh batch for you. Would you like to try? I have also prepared." "Leave it on the table," he said gruffly, turning around and walking back into the room. He disappeared through the door to his bathroom, leaving her alone. Anna swallowed her disappointment and went ahead to set the table. He did not come out of the bathroom even after several minutes. So she left. She did not let that faze her and went back to get the dishes after he was done. After that, she cleaned his room and arranged his stuff. He did not warn her to stay away, but he also paid her no attention. He acted like she was just another maid one, who deeply annoyed him. In fact, he treated the maids better than he treated her. Everybody talked about how polite and kind he was, but she was yet to see any such warmth directed towards her. When the weather was cold, she made hot tea and delivered it to him while he worked. But no matter what she did to show her care and interest in developing a relationship with him, he kept his distance from her and treated her with coldness. One of Anna's most favorite places in the palace was the library. There were so many books to read, so much knowledge to absorb. After years of being restricted to studying magic and poisons, she could finally study whatever she wanted. Reading also quickly became her favorite pastime. While reading, there was no space for worries or concerns in her mind. It was like being in her own private space where nothing could hurt her. One day, while she was walking from the library with a pile of her latest picks, a couple of servants noticed her. Anna always did her best to stay out of everyone's way, but some of them went out of their way to harass her. As she walked down the corridor towards her room, the two servants exchanged glances, then started walking towards her. Anna stuck close to the wall as she walked, but still, one of them got close to her and stuck her foot out. Anna tripped on it and stumbled to the floor, her books scattering all over. Her knees hurt from the impact, but she ignored the pain as she hurried to pick up the books. "Oh, it is her! one of the servants said with a snicker. When Anna went to collect one of the books, she stepped on it. I can't believe she is still here. Living with witches must have made her dense, the other servant said. Can't she see no one wants her here? She bumped her shoe into Anna's leg. You are not welcome here, you dirty witch. Anna ignored them and continued picking up her books. She could not get into a fight with them. She was the outsider. If she fought back, her life here would only get worse. A few moments later, 3 more servants walked down the corridor. These 2 joined the other 2 in humiliating her. They made it hard for her to pick up the books by kicking them around. In the end, they surrounded her like a bunch of hyenas, calling her a witch and asking her to leave the palace. When Anna tried to get up, they pushed her back to the floor. She was helpless, unable to defend herself from their abuse or walk away from it. We should teach her a lesson so that she goes back to where she came from, one of them said, grabbing Anna's hair and pulling her head back. Since she never listens, maybe a beating will work. Good idea, another one agreed. Please let me go, Anna begged, trying to dislodge the hand in her hair. But the servant only pulled tighter. Please let me go, the servant echoed mockingly. If I do, I expect you to run straight out of the palace. Can you do that? Anna's lips trembled and tears filled her eyes. She had thought she could survive the palace, but clearly she had not seen it all. However, before she could completely break down, she saw Lyra appear at the other end of the corridor. As soon as Lyra realized what was going on, she hurried down the corridor. Pushing past a couple of the servants, she placed herself between Anna and them. What the hell are you doing? She demanded, glaring at them. She looked down at Anna, who was still on the floor with her face downturned. It is none of your business, the leader of the group said, folding her arms across her chest stubbornly. This is between us and her. Is that so? Lyra asked. Did she say you could hit her and bully her around? The servant snickered and rolled her eyes skyward. The others stood behind her like a bunch of soldiers awaiting orders from their commander. You better apologize to her, Lyra told the group. I am the one responsible for her in this palace, so bullying her is the same as bullying me. So if you don't want any trouble, I suggest that you apologize to Anna right away. The servants exchanged glances, looking unsure. A few of them looked worried, fearing the repercussions of what would happen, but their leader only looked at Lyra with more contempt. Who do you think you are to order us around and threaten us? She asked with a sneer. You are an Omega just like us. We all know you slept with the king so he could elevate your position. So don't you dare act like you are much better than us. You are worse, a tramp. That is right, another servant said, emboldened by the leader. We all know what you are really like. You are nobody, and you have nothing. It is a wonder you were able to seduce the king. She probably had her witch friend do a spell, a third one said, at which all of them sniggered and laughed. You know what? The leader said, stepping up to Lyra. Why don't you take your little witchy friend and leave the palace together? The palace has been polluted since you showed up. Do us all a favor and disappear. Lyra looked from one servant to the other. Nothing that they said could faze her. She had heard it all before. While her accomplishments were praised and admired by many, there were those that loathed her for them. She was used to hearing insults, but she could not stand it when Anna was bullied. As the one who had requested Julian to release her from confinement, she felt personally responsible for her. If this was the kind of treatment Anna was enduring when she was outside alone, Lyra wanted to make it stop. Anna had already gone through enough at the witches' camp. Lyra had told her that she would have a better life at the palace, and she wanted to make sure that remained true. If you do not apologize, she told them, I'll report all of you to the head of staff and see to it that you are heavily punished. Your choice, one of them echoed mockingly. Do you think you are the queen or something? I'm so tired of this bitch, the leader said. Maybe a beating will set her straight too. One of the others squared his shoulders, hitting his fist into his palm. Yeah, I've been dying to teach this one a lesson. Some of us have been working here for ages, and then she comes out of nowhere, spreads her legs, and suddenly she is above all of us. How the fuck is that fair? The entire group moved towards Lyra menacingly, their intentions clear in their eyes. Lyra felt Anna touch her leg and say something along the lines of backing off and just letting them be. But Lyra had never been good at letting bullies be, even when she could not beat them. And now, why back off when she could teach them a lesson they'd never forget? One of the servants swung his fist towards her, but she grabbed his arm in midair. He tried to jerk it free right away, but found out that her grip was way too strong. What the fuck? He cursed, glaring at her as if his inability to free himself was her fault. When he realized he was no match for her strength, he tried using his other arm. Lyra snapped that one too, then shoved him away. He stumbled into one of his friends, and since her shove was so forceful, they both fell to the floor. Lightweights, the leader scoffed before making her own move. She went to slap Lyra, but Lyra blocked her arm with one hand and grabbed the collar of her uniform with the other. Tightening her grip, Lyra lifted the servant off the floor. Holy shit, the one on the floor said, crawling back on his ass. She is totally crazy. He scrambled to his feet, and so did the other one. Then, they started backing away along with the rest. Sure you want to do this? Lyra asked the servant in her grip. Your troops have deserted you. Let me down, the servant cried, her face as pale as a sheet. I'll not let you go easily if I catch you again, Lyra warned. When she let go of her, the servant fell to the floor on her ass, as her legs seemed to have turned rubbery due to fear. As soon as she got to her feet, she hurried away towards her friends, who were already disappearing around the corner. Lyra turned to Anna, who was trying to gather all the books on the floor. Are you okay? She asked her, as she helped her pick up the books. Yes, Anna said. Thanks for your help. Anna could not express how grateful she was. If Lyra had not shown up, she had no idea what would have happened to her. If anyone bothers you ever again, be sure to tell me, Lyra told her after they collected all the books and started walking towards Anna's room. I'll make sure they get disciplined, so nobody thinks about bothering you again. Anna felt guilty about accepting Lyra's help. If Lyra had not been strong enough, she too would have been harassed by those servants. Also, Anna did not want Lyra's reputation to suffer because of being associated with her. Lyra was doing everything to make her life at the palace comfortable. Anna did not want to turn into a burden to her, even if she did not want to be a bother to Lyra. When they got to the safety of her room, Anna could not help but burst into tears. Everything looked bleak. Her mate did not want her. She was considered an enemy and an outsider, and her presence here was only causing trouble for her friend. It is okay, Lyra told her, hugging her and rubbing her back soothingly. Don't worry, I'll make sure nobody hurts you again. Okay. I should leave, Anna croaked out. Zero doesn't want me, and I don't belong here. I can't stay here. Don't say that, Lyra said, as she led her to take a seat on her bed. You have every right to be here. Don't let them get to you. Anna wished she felt that way. She had been trying to stay positive, but it felt impossible. At that moment, she felt that it was impossible to have a normal life in the palace. She could not change the fact that she had lived and trained with witches, and if that is all people saw about her, then there was nothing she could do about it. Lyra could see the tired look in Anna's eyes. There was none of the joy and light that had been there when she had first come out of confinement. Someone could only be so strong, and it looked like Anna had reached the end of her line. If things kept on like this, she would give up entirely. Lyra helped her calm down with words of assurance, and only left after Anna had gone to sleep. After leaving her room, Lyra went in search of Zero. She could not understand how he could just stand by and watch his mate be so miserable. He had the power to protect her and ensure nobody treated her badly, but he was doing nothing about it. It was so unlike him. She wondered whether Zero's coldness towards Anna had to do with his feelings for her. She thought about the conversation they once had, where she said that he would forget her as soon as he met his mate. Zero had argued that he wouldn't, that he did not think the mate bond would overpower his feelings. When she found him, he was in the study, standing by the window and looking forlornly out of it. He was the only one in the room. "Found you," she said cheerily, walking up to him. She followed his gaze outside. "What are you thinking so hard about?" Zero dropped his gaze and scratched the back of his neck. "Nothing, just tired. You should take a break sometimes," she told him. With the threat of the corrupted wolves, Zero had remained at the palace to help with the issue. Maybe spend some time with Anna. Lyra was watching him closely, so she noticed how his face closed up as soon as she mentioned Anna's name. Zero cleared his throat and nodded his head towards the exit. "Yeah, I gotta go. There is something I have to check." He did not wait for her response as he started his exit. But Lyra knew he was trying to avoid her, and she was determined to talk about the elephant in the room once and for all. "How long are you going to act like this?" she asked after him. "Do you know what she is going through without you?" Zero stopped, but kept his back to her. "Act like what?" Lyra sighed and walked around to face him. "I know how you've been treating Anna. Is it because you don't like her? Or is it because of me?"